So I've been a college student for just over 2 years now, and in my time living on campus, I've had time to learn the dorms, learn how they work, and most importantly, live in them. With that being said, I've also had time to look around campus and understand how things function, how things work, and it's become clear to me that sometimes we're not allocating resources in the best way possible. So with that being said, I wanted to take some time and dive into my particular dorm room and the numbers for my individual school and see what is it that could be done with that space to try and make it feel more lively, give it some more space, and most importantly still provide everything that students are promised and more if they would like. My name is Nick and/or Trollick. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm not going to ask you to subscribe, don't worry. Let's just get into it. So first things first, I think it's important to highlight some guidelines, some criteria that we're going to try and meet for this project, some things that we need to have, some things that we don't need to have, things we need to eliminate, so on and so forth. And so I've made this little list here, and so we're going to start off. One thing that we have to keep in mind throughout this entire project is we're trying to do this under a $6,000 budget. You can see here under my statement for the upcoming semester, you can see that my fee for the room for the upcoming semester is $3,475, which multiplied by 2 comes out to $6,950. So that's going to be our hard mark. We're not going above that limit. That is our absolute cap. Another thing that's extremely important that I wanted to try and keep in mind is abiding by all the laws that need to be in place for building a dorm room, fire hazards and whatnot, what can and cannot be allowed. So obviously all the things that we're already not supposed to be having won't be in there, and on top of that, those things are typically brought by students anyways. So I'm solely doing furniture, only doing practical things, and whatever else I add that would be brought by a student is solely for aesthetic purposes to see how it would look. But yeah, we want to make sure that we're following everything that would clear the university to make those rooms. And of course, the last guideline we want to try and follow is just to try and make each room as accommodating as possible, have space available for whatever personal belongings the person brings. I know that's a big issue that I have, is we just have no space to put anything. So that's a big thing that I want to focus on. With those guidelines out of the way, I think we're ready to move on to our first design. So here is our first little design here, and I feel like overall we did a pretty good job at keeping the environment of the room the same. For example, like I mentioned, the paint is quite literally almost identical to the color that we have in our room. It's about as close as I could possibly get it. Additionally, the floors are exactly the same as what we have in my dorm room, so it's practically identical. The only thing that's changed is the furniture, and overall I think even if you just look at it compared to my actual room and how those cupboards and whatnot look with all the wood, you can see that there's a very evident difference in just the overall tone of the room, how it feels. It just feels more welcoming. A lot of it actually seems to almost come down to the decor. For example, you look at the rug, I feel like it adds a lot, but the difference is, we have a rug in our room. It's interesting to see how, depending on how the rest of the room is placed, how much of a difference one particular item makes to the overall atmosphere, and sometimes it can either add or subtract, and in our room it almost feels like it's too much, but here it actually feels quite nice. It's pretty centered in the room, and it also gives you a real sense of scale, so you can actually see how much more room we've made here. And like I said, obviously this is more of a base model, so you're not gonna have all the trash buildup and whatnot that we usually have with bottles and whatnot everywhere. So I understand that that definitely plays a role in how a room can get messy and how a room looks overall, because obviously how a room looks when it's filled with trash compared to when it's empty and clean makes a really big difference. Even just from an overall standpoint, we have everything that you need to make the room comfortable. We match all the requirements that are needed. For example, the bathroom with the shower, that's just kind of obvious. I mean, that's part of the room structure. We're not changing the room structure, we're just changing what goes in it. So that's stays the same, nothing has changed there. Smoke detector and fire sprinklers, that would be able to go in the same spot since nothing can go on the ceiling anyway. It's kind of implied that there's a roof, I just haven't put it for obviously demonstration purposes. The dresser is what we changed, and the reason why we changed the dresser is because you have these massive, gigantic dressers, and there's 2 of them. So when you put the 2 of them together, they quite literally take up over 50% of a wall with the additional wood paneling that they have on there. I wanted to approach that in a different way, so therefore we compacted it and combined the dressers together and put them into one shelf. Having them together and even having 5 shelves is more than enough. You don't really need more than 5 shelves, especially if you have your closet, which we don't necessarily even use. This comes at an extremely cheap price. It's more compact and it looks better. It's more modern. So we did make a difference, a change on the bunk beds here, and obviously I understand where my individual university comes from, and a lot of universities come from having separate beds, because sometimes people don't want to bunk. There's really no reason to. So here is the way that I have it. This room could technically be rearranged with the beds separated, but this model that I chose to purchase actually comes as a whole. So this would be one of those situations where you have to make some sacrifices in terms of sleeping comfort versus having a greater surface area in the room. And so I feel like this is a decision that obviously the university would have to make, and they would have to make it based off of research. It would have to see, how many students truly care, how many have slept in bunk beds, how many people registered for bunk beds, how many people actually changed their beds to bunk beds when they got there. These are all important things that if they were assessed, could give you direct input on how to make these rooms better overall. And it's the fact that it just simply hasn't been done, I feel like really sets back progress for changing and making living environments for students more valuable, more promising, and most importantly, more comfortable. So yeah, obviously this bunk bed is entirely one. It does not come apart, but I feel like because of that reason, we get a lot more room, and that's one thing that we did in my dorm room. Once we bunked those beds, it literally opened up the entire room. And partially it comes down to the size of those beds too. They're kind of obnoxiously large and wide in terms of the wood and what they're made out of. That's kind of the theme for all the furniture that we're given. So I'm just really trying to avoid that theme and get more compact yet comfortable furniture that still is within the budget, still comfortable, still high quality, and will get the job done. Because honestly, that's the most important part, right? And so additionally, one other problem that I had to get rid of is the desk. So I decided to put a desk in here, and so the desk came from the idea that the ones that we were given, you can see in the example pictures that I show you guys of what our room actually looks like, you can see that the desks that we have, you can quite literally fit a computer and a notebook. Like, that's about it onto those desks. On top of that, they give you a little bit of a shelf, but that shelf doesn't really serve much of a purpose because you also can't really put anything on there. You can put like a photo, a few cups, and maybe some basic necessities that you need, like keys and whatnot. That's about it. You really can't fit much on there. Here is kind of what we've done. We've given students a ton of space in terms of desks. We've got a ton of room for storage. On top of that, you've got some storage under the beds too. And then you've got this whole top for decor, whatever you want to do. You could load it up, put whatever you want there. Honestly, the possibilities are endless here. The desk could easily fit 2 computers. I only put one because for my given situation, we only needed space for 1 computer. But I had to actually bring a whole other table because these items and furniture we were given were so large, we couldn't rearrange them in a way that allowed for me to fit my computer. You'd think that a university would think about things like this, think that somebody may end up bringing larger items that they need to put on a desk. In this modern age where everything is digital, everything is online, and the vast majority of companies have some sort of work from home order in place, you would think that they would start making room for people to bring more technology, have multiple computers, because it's not an uncommon thing. Obviously, we also can't forget about, we have these cupboards on the walls, which, like I said, we'll go over pricing in a little bit, but these are extremely cheap too. They're, each of them are like under $40 or something like that. Of course, it's a question of fire safety, whether or not that's possible, and I've tried to do the most research that I can in terms of this state's fire safety laws, but to be honest with you, it's extremely challenging to find, which I don't know if maybe I'm just an idiot or what, but I would think that something that important would be pretty easy to locate, especially because that's just a widely needed thing. It's a fire safety hazard law for construction. people need to know that, right? If you are wanting to look it up and understand it, that should be accessible to you, but that's an entirely separate issue. So with that being said, I've kind of just tried to abide by the university policy that says less than 20% on each wall. And for this room, I've kind of made some exceptions, and maybe these sound pads are a bit overboard, and maybe the mirror is a bit too large, but this is just kind of going to show what could be done with all this space. And even if you wanted to take the sound pads off and the mirror off, that still gives you, 3 whole walls of room. Especially even if you look over here, like, you have this entire wall, and I even put a giant poster there to prove that you could put something there. And it's also, let's not forget about the fact that students do bring their own things. It's not uncommon for people to bring a little cart, maybe some kind of area for snacks, a little drawer or whatever, rolling drawer. And it's a good thing that we have this little area here, because I almost put that little spot so that you could have some room to customize. And that's one thing that I'm realizing as a big con, is that a lot of these items, if you want to modernize the room, become ingrained, I guess, into the room. For example, if you want to put things on the walls, you kind of have to work around those walls. And not only that, but of course they, sometimes provide a fire safety hazard. So even if we were to, just get rid of these and put just the, leave just the walls, you still have a really, really nice looking room. And I'm not sure if this would be against policy, because this would be a question for the people that do know the fire safety laws. But if you could put shelves on the walls like we have here, you could fill up a lot of these walls with hanging shelves, and that would help a ton. Yeah, and of course, the question is, are a lot of these things to scale? And I tried my best. The room is based off the dimensions we're given online, but in terms of these modeled items, I did model these myself. These weren't based, they were based around actual items and actual sizes, but of course there's always a margin for error when you're rebuilding something, especially in such a small time frame that I'm working in. So a lot of this is just previs of what could be done if you just change the furniture style. And that's really my main point here, is not the fact that you could make so much more room, but also in making that much more room by modernizing your furniture, you have a more lively room with more space and an overall better atmosphere, instead of just having that two-tone of flushed yellow wall coloring and the dry old 70s wood, right? So you just have some more variation, some more color, and when you have more color, the brain just naturally adapts to that type of atmosphere. So that's one thing that I'm really just trying to focus on, is proving that with this particular design, keeping all aspects of the room the same in terms of color, in terms of floor, in terms of important fundamental room properties, you could still provide something that meets all the criteria and provides a wonderful dorm experience. And obviously, guys, here is our little breakdown of the furniture and how much it all costed when I was looking through it. And so of course, there's some variation with the beds and whatnot, and what you could do, because there's obviously different versions, different styles, different colors and whatnot, but roughly we are between the 1531 and 2000 range, which is well under our price range. And so obviously under shelves you can see none, and this just comes down to the whole fire safety idea. I did keep these bookshelves up because of aesthetic purposes, and just to prove that even with something on the wall, it's still going to be relatively cheap. And this is including the mirror, this is including the sound panels that we decided to take off in the render, just to show that even if you took it off, they would have a ton of space on the walls. So 1531 is obviously not bad at all, and the question comes down to, this is 1531 per room. And so of course, when you think about a university or any large business or school or whatever it is that's trying to furnish an entire building, especially if they're buying multiple of the same item, most businesses who sell anything offer bulk prices. So I imagine that part of the issue is that there are a lot of dorm specific manufacturers who create furniture specifically for dorm rooms, and I've found some of them myself that provide these extremely cheap ideal dorm room furniture for extremely cheap prices, and that's kind of where we fall short in terms of making the rooms nicer. But here I imagine that a lot of these items could also be purchased for bulk. For example, from IKEA, half of this stuff is from IKEA, this is from IKEA, this is from IKEA, this is from IKEA, so all of it can be purchased in bulk, right? I'm sure that's something that could be done, could be arranged. With that being said, we have done everything identical, what you would do in pre-visualizing a room, right? We picked our furniture, we designed the furniture, we made it to scale, we put it in the room that we need to put it in, and it all works. So for 1530, 190, you could still keep all the walls and all the fundamental properties of the room exactly the same, yet it would create an entirely brand new atmosphere. And we'll go over what this means at the end of the video, but there are inherent positives to something like that. There are inherent positives in a marketing perspective, from a business perspective, to bringing in a new prospect of students just from designing your rooms properly instead of hiding them. So this is just one design I wanted to show, but overall I think we did an excellent job keeping under our price range, making sure that we hit all the fundamentals yet still staying within the law and the school requirements. So with that being said, I think this is pretty sufficient evidence, with all things considered, that you could do it. Of course, there may be some things that I'm missing in terms of behind the scenes activities and whatnot and cost. This is just something that I've found. So obviously I think the design turned out pretty well, but there's still some things that we need to go over from a pros and cons perspective. For example, I know a big argument that I'm probably going to get for my design is the fact that the furniture is primarily IKEA and Wayfair furniture. And my whole point in choosing IKEA and Wayfair furniture, obviously outside of the fact that it's cheap, is because there's really no other manufacturer that creates furniture modern enough in design to be able to fit the requirements of college university furniture, if that makes sense. So obviously a big critique that I had with a lot of the furniture that we were given is the fact that they are just obnoxiously large, and the reason for that is kind of obvious. When you have a bunch of freshmen coming in, because this is a primarily freshman dorm, when you have a bunch of freshmen coming in who literally want nothing to do but party, right? I mean, that's an over-exaggeration, but it's no surprise that that does happen. It's likely that things will get broken, and as a university, you want to be able to minimize your costs as much as possible. Any business wants to do that, right? That's how you make a better profit. So obviously, when you choose something as cheap as IKEA or Wayfair, you know that there's a higher chance that they're going to get broken, because let's all admit it, even trying to build IKEA furniture, you're likely to break it. So yeah, I mean, the biggest reason why I ended up taking that route is because obviously it helped me meet my requirements better, but also there's really no other distributors of furniture that's sufficient enough, I think, to meet the criteria that's really needed for a university. But at the same time, I think we came to a point where we made it cheap enough where it would really come down to having to look at how many incidences actually happen at universities to figure out, or at this university, to figure out what that cost would be. Because if you can calculate on average how many of these incidents happen and what they're usually made out of, for example, like how they happen, whether it happens on the wall, whether it's paint, whether it's furniture, whether it's something in the bathroom or whatnot, if you can track all that and understand how it happens, you can start making a decision about whether you want to go cheaper on the furniture yet still be able to make it more modern. The main reason why I even wanted to do this in the first place is not to like stick it or anything, because I totally get it. You know, you only have so much space and this building's been around for a long time. I do understand. That's not my point. My point is that when we were initially touring this school, I fell in love with it from day one, and then they didn't show us the dorm buildings. They only showed us one building, and it was a newly furnished building. It was the nicest one, and we were like, wow, this is really cool. And we were told about this other building, and they were honest. They said they're not as nice, but they never said how not nice, right? And there's no pictures online. There's no pictures basically anywhere. If you want to do research, you have to find a way to get into the building, because there are not many people who are doing videos on it. And that's kind of why I wanted to show this right here, because the way I see it, right, if you can be fully transparent in a time where people demand transparency from higher powers and corporations and businesses and schools, you are more likely to bring in students, simply due to the fact that you were honest with them. You had shown them exactly what they were getting into, and not only that, but made what they were getting into nice and something that people wanted, right? Something that people demanded. So when you have these rooms that are fully remodeled, fully nice, up to standard, up to code, and up to the modern design, I don't see how that could be a fundamentally bad thing. My whole point in making this video is I want to just come out here and show that it is possible. And of course, I'm not trying to say that this is the be-all and the end-all. There's obviously more ways that you could do it. This design is not foolproof at all, and I will admit that it's not. There's plenty of things that are wrong with it. But this was really just to show that if you even put a mild thought into it, and you have the data to try and back it up, for example, room issues and furniture destruction, you could easily start making these rooms better, and you could do it in every building. So that's kind of what I wanted to come out here and talk about. Obviously, I'm not trying to say that this is at all bad. I'm not trying to diss my school or anything like that. I'm presenting an idea, basically. And me being a marketing student, I think this was something that was really interesting to do. It was something really interesting for my 3D skills too. It's not something that I've done before, and of course it's not necessarily the highest quality work that I've done in 3D modeling, but it's good enough. So if you're still here, I really appreciate you. Thank you so much for watching. I hope to see you guys in the next one. I have some cool stuff planned. I think some stuff that's not necessarily within what I usually do, but I think it will be just as interesting. So thank you guys again. I appreciate you, and see you guys next time.